Right now, 88% of self-made millionaires share 5 specific daily habits. And not one of those habits is working harder. That number comes from a 5-year study of 233 wealthy individuals, and it shattered everything researchers thought they knew about success. You have been told your entire life that the path to wealth is effort, discipline, and sacrifice. That is scientifically wrong. And in the next 9 minutes, you are going to understand exactly why and what to do instead. Let me be direct with you. You are not lazy. You are not lacking talent. You are not missing some secret that wealthy people whisper to each other at private dinners. What you are missing is a mechanism, a specific neurological mechanism that determines whether your daily actions compound toward wealth or compound toward stagnation. And that distinction, that single word, mechanism, is the reason you are listening to this book instead of another motivational pep talk that fades in 48 hours. Here is the uncomfortable truth. You have probably read the books. You have listened to the podcasts. You might have even built a morning routine, tracked your spending for a few weeks, set ambitious goals on January 1st, and none of it stuck. Not because the advice was wrong, not because you failed to execute, but because every single one of those efforts relied on the same flawed engine, your willpower. And willpower, according to a landmark study from the University of Pennsylvania led by psychologist Angela Duckworth, is not what separates the successful from the unsuccessful. Let me say that again, because it contradicts almost everything you have been told. Willpower is not the differentiator. Duckworth's research across military cadets, spelling bee champions, and Fortune 500 executives found that long-term success correlated far more strongly with automatic behavioral patterns than with conscious self-control. The people who appeared to have extraordinary discipline did not actually exercise more willpower than everyone else. They had simply built better automatic systems. They had engineered their habits so that the right actions required almost no conscious effort at all. This is the gap. This is the invisible line between the people who build wealth and the people who chase it. It is not about what you know. It is about what you do automatically, without thinking, every single day. And right now, whether you realize it or not, you already have a wealth habit system running in your brain. The problem is, it was not designed by you. It was installed by your upbringing, your environment, your social circle, and decades of unconscious repetition. And for most people, that default system is pointed directly at financial stagnation. Consider this. Researchers at Duke University published findings showing that approximately 40% of the actions people perform each day are not actual decisions. They are habits, not choices. Automatic behaviors executed by a part of your brain that does not consult your goals, your ambitions, or your 5-year plan. 40% of your day is running on autopilot. The question is not whether you have habits. You do. The question is whether those habits are building wealth or burning it. Now here is where most people get it wrong, and this is critical, so stay with me. The average person tries to change their financial life by making better decisions. They tell themselves they will spend less, save more, invest smarter. And for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, they do. But decisions require energy. Every choice you make throughout the day draws from a limited cognitive resource. By evening, that resource is depleted. This is not a metaphor. It is neuroscience. Researchers at the National Academy of Sciences studied judges making parole decisions and found that favorable rulings dropped from 65% to nearly zero as the day progressed and decision fatigue accumulated. The judges were not becoming less fair. They were becoming cognitively exhausted. And when the brain is exhausted, it defaults to the easiest option, the most familiar pattern, the existing habit. So every night, when your willpower is spent, your brain does exactly what it was built to do. It falls back on your default programming. And if that programming includes scrolling instead of reading, spending instead of investing, consuming content instead of creating value, then no amount of morning motivation will override the system that runs the other 23 hours of your day. This is why people who earn 6 figures still live paycheck to paycheck. This is why intelligent, educated, hardworking people watch their peers build wealth and cannot understand what they are doing differently. The difference is not intelligence. It is not information. It is not even effort. The difference is habit architecture, the deliberate engineering of automatic daily behaviors that compound, invisibly and relentlessly, toward a specific financial outcome. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. The average professional wakes up, checks their phone within the first 4 minutes, scrolls through notifications and news for 12 to 20 minutes, and begins their day in a reactive state. Their brain has already been flooded with other people's priorities, other people's emergencies, other people's metrics of success. Before they have made a single intentional choice, their neurological state has been shaped by external input. Their morning is not theirs. Their first hour is a response, not a design. Now compare that to what high net worth individuals report in behavioral studies. A study published in the Journal of Financial Planning surveyed individuals with investable assets above $1 million and found that 71% had a structured, consistent morning protocol that they followed before engaging with any external input. Not because they were naturally disciplined, but because they had installed a sequence of behaviors that ran automatically. The phone stayed off. The routine executed. The first 90 minutes of their day belonged to their own strategic priorities, not to the noise of the world. Same 24 hours. Same human brain. Radically different architecture. And over months and years, that architectural difference compounds into a financial canyon between two people who started in exactly the same place. You might be thinking that this sounds familiar. You might even be thinking you have heard this before. And you probably have, in some form. But here is the part that most books skip, and it is the reason you are still stuck. Knowing that habits matter is not the same as knowing how to install them. And that is what separates this book from everything else on your shelf. This is not a list of good habits. This is not 21 days of vague encouragement. This is the installation manual, the neuroscience of how your brain actually writes new automatic programs, and the precise method for targeting those programs at financial outcomes. In the chapters ahead, you're going to learn exactly how habits form at the neurological level, why your brain resists new ones, and the specific technique that makes installation nearly effortless. You will learn the 5 keystone habits that 88% of self-made millionaires share, and more importantly, the mechanism that locks them into your daily routine permanently. You will discover why announcing your goals is the most dangerous thing you can do, why the first 5 seconds of your morning determine your entire financial trajectory, and why comfort is not neutral, but is actively eroding your capacity for wealth. But all of that starts with one fundamental shift. A shift that does not happen in your schedule, your budget, or your to-do list. It happens in your identity. Because the question that drives your automatic behavior every single day is not what should I do. The question your brain is actually answering, beneath your awareness, is who am I? And until you change that answer, no habit system in the world will hold. That shift, the identity shift, is exactly where we are going next. And it will change the way you see every financial decision you have ever made. Chapter 2, The Neuroscience of Automatic Wealth. Somewhere deep inside your skull, a structure the size of a walnut is running your financial life. And you have never been formally introduced. That structure is the basal ganglia, and neuroscientists at MIT's McGovern Institute for Brain Research have spent decades proving that it is the command center for every automatic behavior you perform. Every habit you have, from how you brush your teeth to how you spend your paycheck, is encoded in this ancient, efficient, and extraordinarily stubborn part of your brain. And until you understand how it works, you are fighting your own biology every time you try to change. Here is what happens neurologically when you try to build a new habit through sheer willpower. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain behind your forehead, fires up. This is your conscious decision-making engine. It is powerful, rational, and strategic. It is also expensive to run. The prefrontal cortex consumes enormous amounts of glucose and oxygen. It tires quickly, and the moment it tires, the basal ganglia takes over. Whatever behavioral program is already installed becomes the default. This is not weakness. This is engineering. Your brain is designed to conserve energy by automating repeated behaviors. The question is simply which behaviors get automated. Psychologist Wendy Wood at the University of Southern California has published some of the most rigorous research on behavioral automaticity. Her lab tracked the daily actions of hundreds of participants over extended periods and found something remarkable. When people performed a behavior in a consistent context, the same time, the same place, the same preceding action, that behavior transferred from prefrontal control to basal ganglia control in an average of 66 days. Not 21, as the popular myth suggests. 66. But here is the part that changes everything. Once the transfer happened, the behavior required almost zero willpower to maintain. It had become automatic. It had become, in the truest neurological sense, who that person was. This is the mechanism. This is what nobody told you. The reason your financial habits have not changed is not that you lack discipline. It is that you have been trying to run new behaviors on your prefrontal cortex permanently, which is like trying to run a marathon on a phone battery. The battery dies. The old program restarts. And you wake up 3 weeks later doing exactly what you were doing before, wondering what went wrong. Now, let me show you how this plays out with money. Think about the last purchase you made that you later regretted. Maybe it was an impulse buy online, a meal that cost more than it should have, or a subscription you forgot to cancel. In the moment, it did not feel like a choice. It felt automatic, and it was. Your brain had encoded a behavioral loop. A cue triggered a routine, and the routine delivered a reward. This is the habit loop that MIT researchers first mapped in the late 1990s, and it is the operating system behind every financial behavior you perform, whether you are aware of it or not. The loop works like this. First, a cue, an environmental trigger that tells your brain to initiate a stored program. This could be a notification on your phone, the end of a workday, a feeling of stress, even a specific time of day. Second, a routine, the behavior itself. Opening a shopping app, ordering delivery food, skipping the transfer to your savings account. Third, a reward, the neurochemical payoff, usually a small release of dopamine, that tells your brain this loop is worth repeating. And every time the loop completes, the neural pathway strengthens. The connections between those neurons become faster, thicker, more insulated. The behavior becomes more automatic, more effortless, more invisible. This is compounding at the neurological level. And just like financial compounding, it works in both directions. Every time you complete a wealth-eroding habit loop, that loop gets stronger. Every time you complete a wealth-building habit loop, that loop gets stronger. The direction of compounding depends entirely on which loops you have installed. Here is a number that will reframe your entire relationship with daily decisions. Researchers at the University of British Columbia calculated that the average person makes approximately 35,000 decisions per day. 35,000. And the vast majority of those decisions are handled by the basal ganglia without any conscious input. If you are trying to improve your financial life by making better conscious decisions, you are attempting to manually override a system that processes thousands of actions per day on autopilot. It is not a matter of trying harder. It is a matter of reprogramming the autopilot. So how does reprogramming actually work? This is where the science gets actionable. Wendy Wood's research identified 3 critical conditions for successful habit formation. Miss any one of them, and the behavior stays in prefrontal territory, burning willpower until it inevitably collapses. Condition 1, context consistency. The behavior must occur in the same context repeatedly. Same time, same location, same preceding action. This is why you brush your teeth automatically, but cannot seem to meditate consistently. Brushing has a fixed context. Meditation floats around your schedule. Context is the anchor that tells your basal ganglia this is a routine, not a one-time event. Condition 2, repetition without variation. The behavior must be performed the same way, in the same sequence, enough times for the neural pathway to solidify. Variation is the enemy of automaticity. Every time you change the details, you pull the behavior back into prefrontal control and restart the encoding process. This is why people who change their investment strategy every quarter never build automatic wealth behaviors. Their brain never finishes encoding any single approach. Condition 3, intrinsic reward. The behavior must produce some form of immediate positive feedback, not a distant future payoff, an immediate neurological reward. This is the piece that most financial habit systems completely ignore. Saving $50 does not feel like anything in the moment. But pairing that action with a visible progress tracker, a brief moment of self-acknowledgement, or even a physical ritual like moving a token from one jar to another creates a dopamine microdose that tells the basal ganglia this loop is worth keeping. These three conditions, context, repetition, and reward, are the installation protocol for any habit. They are not motivational principles. They are neurological requirements. And when you apply them deliberately to financially targeted behaviors, you are not hoping for change. You are engineering it at the level of brain architecture. Now, there is a concept from computational neuroscience that I want you to carry through the rest of this book. It is called chunking. When the basal ganglia encodes a habit, it does not store the behavior as a series of individual steps. It compresses the entire sequence into a single neurological unit, a chunk, that can be executed as one action. This is why you do not think about each step of tying your shoes. The entire sequence is one chunk. One cue triggers the whole program. The implication for your financial life is profound. Once a wealth-building behavior is chunked, it no longer competes with your other mental demands. It runs in the background. You do not have to remember to do it, motivate yourself to do it, or fight the urge to skip it. It just runs, like software operating beneath your conscious awareness, silently compounding toward the financial outcome it was designed to produce. This is what I mean when I say the mechanism, not the mood. Motivation fluctuates. Willpower depletes. But a properly installed habit chunk runs whether you feel like it or not. Whether the market is up or down. Whether your boss praised you or criticized you. Whether you slept well or barely at all. The mechanism does not care about your mood. It just executes. You now understand something that 95% of people trying to build wealth do not. You understand why willpower fails, how habits are neurologically encoded, and what conditions must be met for a new behavior to become automatic. But understanding the mechanism is step one. The question that matters now is, which habits, which specific behaviors, installed in which specific sequence, produce the greatest financial compounding effect? That is exactly what the next chapter delivers. 5 Keystone Habits, backed by a 5-year study of self-made millionaires, and the installation logic that makes them stick. Chapter 3, The 5 Keystone Habits of Self-Made Millionaires. Not all habits are created equal. Some habits are decorative. They make you feel productive without actually moving the needle. And some habits are keystone. They trigger a cascade of other positive behaviors that compound far beyond their individual value. The concept of keystone habits was first described by Charles Duhigg, but the financial application comes from a far more targeted body of research. When Thomas Corley spent 5 years tracking the daily routines of 233 self-made millionaires and comparing them against 128 individuals who struggled financially, he did not find hundreds of differences. He found 5 consistent behavioral patterns that appeared in 88% of the wealthy group and less than 12% of the struggling group. 5 keystone habits. Not 50, not a lifestyle overhaul. 5 behaviors that, once installed, restructured the rest of their financial lives. Let me walk you through each one. And as I do, I want you to notice something. None of them require extraordinary ability. None of them require capital. And none of them take more than 30 minutes a day. What they require is installation. And that is the part most people skip. Keystone habit number 1, daily strategic learning. 76% of Corley's wealthy subjects read for self-education at least 30 minutes per day, not for entertainment, for strategic knowledge acquisition targeted at their field or financial goals. The struggling group consumed media passively, news, social media, entertainment, at nearly the same volume of time, but directed almost none of it toward deliberate skill or knowledge building. Now, the mechanism here is not that reading makes you smarter. It is that the act of daily strategic learning keeps your prefrontal cortex engaged with your long-term objectives. It counteracts the gravitational pull of short-term thinking. A study from the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management found that individuals who engaged in daily deliberate learning demonstrated 37% stronger long-range planning behaviors than those who did not. The habit does not just build knowledge. It rewires your decision-making orientation from reactive to strategic. Keystone habit number 2, daily financial contact. 67% of wealthy individuals in the study engaged with their finances every single day. Not budgeting sessions, not spreadsheets. Brief, consistent contact. Checking investment performance for 2 minutes. Reviewing account balances. Scanning one financial headline. The key is frequency, not duration. Behavioral research from Duke University demonstrates that frequent low-intensity contact with a domain maintains basal ganglia, encoding for behaviors in that domain. In plain language, when you touch your finances daily, your brain keeps financial decision-making in an active, prioritized state. When you only check your money when something goes wrong, your brain encodes finances as a threat category, triggering avoidance rather than engagement. This single shift, from monthly panic to daily contact, changes the entire emotional and neurological relationship between you and your money. Keystone habit number 3, structured goal rehearsal. 62% of Corley's wealthy group practiced some form of daily goal review or visualization. But this is not the fluffy visualization you have seen on social media. Research from the Dominican University of California found that people who wrote down their goals, reviewed them regularly, and shared progress with an accountability partner achieved 42% more than those who simply held goals in their heads. The structured part matters. Writing, reviewing, and tracking is the full sequence. The neurological reason is specificity. Vague goals activate the brain's default mode network, which is associated with mind-wandering and passivity. Specific, reviewed goals activate the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which drives executive planning and task initiation. The habit of reviewing your financial goals every morning, even for 90 seconds, is not a motivational exercise. It is a prefrontal cortex activation protocol. Keystone habit number 4, controlled social environment. 79% of wealthy individuals in the study actively managed their social circle. They limited exposure to chronically negative people and deliberately increased time with individuals who were ahead of them financially or professionally. This is not elitism. It is neuroscience. Research from Harvard Medical School's Framingham Heart Study, which tracked over 12,000 individuals across 3 decades, demonstrated that behaviors, including financial behaviors, spread through social networks like contagion. If someone in your immediate social circle becomes obese, your probability of becoming obese increases by 57%. The same network effect applies to spending habits, saving behaviors, and financial risk tolerance. Your basal ganglia does not only encode your own repeated behaviors, it encodes the behavioral norms of the people around you. You do not just adopt their ideas, you adopt their automatic patterns. Controlling your social environment is not optional for wealth building. It is a neurological prerequisite. Keystone habit number 5, pre-commitment elimination. This habit appeared in 81% of the wealthy group and is the one most books ignore entirely. Pre-commitment elimination means making decisions in advance that remove the need for willpower in the moment. Setting up automatic savings transfers so you never have to decide to save. Deleting shopping apps so you never have to resist impulse buying. Preparing meals on Sunday so you never have to choose between cooking and expensive delivery on a Wednesday night. Researchers at Yale's Department of Psychology refer to this as choice architecture, and their studies show that eliminating the need for a decision is 3 to 4 times more effective than trying to make the right decision in the moment. The wealthy do not resist temptation. They engineer environments where temptation never reaches them. This is the habit that separates the theoretical from the operational. You can know everything about habit formation and still fail if your environment is working against you. A Stanford University study on self-control found that individuals who scored highest on self-control questionnaires did not actually resist more temptations than their lower-scoring peers. They simply encountered fewer temptations. Their lives were structured to minimize the need for resistance. Pre-commitment elimination is not a hack. It is the infrastructure that makes every other habit possible. Now, here is what I need you to understand about these 5 habits. Individually, each one is simple, almost embarrassingly simple. 30 minutes of strategic reading, 2 minutes of financial contact, 90 seconds of goal review, choosing your social circle with intention, setting up systems that pre-decide for you. None of this sounds revolutionary, and that is exactly the point. The average person hears these habits and thinks, I already know that. But knowing is not having. Having a habit means it is installed in your basal ganglia, runs automatically, and executes without willpower. And the distance between knowing about a habit and having it encoded neurologically is the distance between financial stagnation and financial freedom. Corley's research revealed something else that most summaries of his work leave out. The wealthy individuals in his study did not adopt all 5 habits simultaneously. They installed them sequentially, one at a time, over months. They let each habit transfer from prefrontal control to basal ganglia automation before adding the next one. They understood, intuitively or deliberately, that habit installation is not an event. It is an engineering process. And engineering takes time, precision, and a sequence. You now have the 5 Keystone habits. You have the research behind each one. And you understand that the mechanism of installation, the transfer from conscious effort to automatic execution, is what separates someone who reads about success from someone who lives it. But installation requires something deeper than technique. It requires a foundation that most people have never built. Because the truth is, you can install all 5 of these habits perfectly, and they will still collapse within weeks if one thing is missing. And that one thing is not discipline, motivation, or accountability. It is identity. Who you believe you are determines which behaviors your brain allows to stick. And that identity shift is the subject of the next chapter. Chapter 4. Identity is the operating system. You do not need new habits. You need a new identity. That sounds like a motivational slogan, but it is actually a neuroscientific statement. And understanding the difference between those two things is the reason some people transform their financial lives permanently, while others cycle through the same self-help loop year after year. Here is the problem with every habit system that starts with behavior. When you try to adopt a new routine that conflicts with your existing self-image, your brain treats it as a foreign object. The same way your immune system rejects a transplanted organ, your psychological identity rejects behaviors that do not match who you believe you are. This is not a metaphor. It is a documented cognitive phenomenon called identity-based motivation, studied extensively by Daphne Oyserman at the University of Southern California. Her research shows that when a behavior is consistent with a person's self-concept, adherence rates increase by up to 300% compared to behaviors adopted purely for outcome-based reasons. 300%, not a marginal improvement, a fundamental shift in sticking power. Let me make this concrete. If you identify as someone who is bad with money, every wealth-building habit you attempt is fighting against your operating system. You might force yourself to save for a few weeks. You might track your spending for a month. But your brain will continuously generate friction against those behaviors because they conflict with the program labeled me. You will find excuses. You will forget. You will feel like you are pretending. And eventually, you will stop. Not because you are weak, because your identity won the fight. It always wins. Now consider the inverse. If you shift your identity first, if you genuinely begin to see yourself as someone who builds wealth systematically, then the same habits that felt like a battle become a confirmation. Every time you save, your brain registers a match between action and identity. That match produces a small neurochemical reward, and that reward strengthens the habit loop without any additional willpower. Identity alignment is not a feel-good exercise. It is the difference between swimming with the current and swimming against it. So how does identity actually shift? This is where most personal development content falls apart. They tell you to use affirmations. Stand in front of a mirror and say, I am wealthy. And while affirmation research from Carnegie Mellon University shows that self-affirmation can reduce stress responses, there is a critical caveat that almost no one mentions. Affirmations only work when the brain has some behavioral evidence to support the claim. Telling yourself you are wealthy while your behavior patterns scream otherwise does not reprogram identity. It creates cognitive dissonance, which actually increases anxiety and avoidance. The mechanism that works is what psychologists call identity-based evidence accumulation. Every time you perform a small behavior that is consistent with your desired identity, your brain logs a data point. One data point means nothing, but 50 data points, 100, 300, and your brain starts to revise the model. The identity literally shifts because the evidence demands it. This is not willpower. This is statistics. Your brain is a prediction machine, and it updates its predictions based on behavioral data. Feed it enough consistent data, and it will rewrite who you believe you are. Here is what this looks like in financial terms. You do not start by trying to save $1,000 a month. You start by transferring $5 today. That transfer is not financially meaningful. It is psychologically meaningful. It is one vote for the identity of someone who builds wealth. Tomorrow, you do it again. Another vote. And the day after. And within weeks, your brain begins to update its model. You are no longer someone trying to save money. You are someone who saves money. And that shift from trying to being is the moment the basal ganglia starts encoding the behavior as a permanent routine. This is exactly the principle James Clear described as casting votes for the person you want to become. But most people who read that concept never apply it to their financial identity specifically. They apply it to fitness, to reading, to meditation. And they leave their money identity untouched. They continue to tell themselves the same financial story. I am not a money person. I grew up without financial education. I am not the type who invests, while wondering why their financial habits never stick. There is a revealing study from the University of Michigan that illustrates this perfectly. Researchers found that when participants were asked to describe themselves financially, the language they used predicted their saving behavior over the following 12 months more accurately than their income level, their financial literacy scores, or their stated intentions. People who described themselves as savers saved. People who described themselves as spenders spent, regardless of how much they earned or how much they knew about money. The identity dictated the behavior, not the reverse. And changing the behavior without changing the identity was, in the researchers' words, a temporary intervention with a predictable expiration date. The average person defines their identity by their current circumstances. They look at their bank account and conclude that they are not wealthy, and then they behave accordingly. The elite performer defines their identity by the system they are running. They look at their daily habits and ask one question: does someone who is building serious wealth do this? Not does this feel good? Not can I afford to? Does someone building serious wealth behave this way right now, in this moment, with this decision? That question, carried into every micro decision of your day, is the most powerful financial tool you will ever possess. It does not require a budget app. It does not require a spreadsheet. It requires a single cognitive reframe. Stop asking what should I do and start asking who am I being. Research from Stanford University's psychology department found that identity-framed decisions, those made by asking, am I this type of person, produced significantly stronger behavioral consistency than outcome-framed decisions, those made by asking, will this get me what I want? The identity frame activates self-concept maintenance, one of the most powerful motivational systems in the human brain. When you act in a way that contradicts your identity, your brain experiences discomfort. When you act in a way that confirms it, your brain experiences reward. Build the right identity, and the discomfort of skipping your habits becomes greater than the discomfort of doing them. So here is your first real assignment from this book. Not a hypothetical exercise, an identity declaration. Complete this sentence. I am the kind of person who builds wealth by doing these things daily. And then identify 3 micro behaviors, each taking less than 2 minutes, that you will begin performing every single day as evidence for that identity. Not because they will make you rich tomorrow, because they will change who your brain believes you are. And once your brain believes it, the habits stop being effortful. They become inevitable. Your identity is the operating system. Your habits are the applications. And no application runs smoothly on a corrupted operating system. Get the identity right, and the habits install themselves. Get it wrong, and no amount of productivity hacks will save you. Now that your operating system is set, there is one moment each day that either reinforces it or demolishes it. One single moment, lasting no more than 5 seconds, that researchers have identified as the most consequential decision of your entire day. It happens before your feet hit the floor. That moment is where we go. Next, Chapter 5, the first 5 seconds of your day. Your alarm goes off. 5 seconds pass, and in that window, your entire financial trajectory for the day has already been decided. That sounds extreme. It is also supported by neuroscience research that most people have never seen. The 5-second window between your alarm and your response is not a trivial moment. It is the opening act of your daily identity performance, and the way you handle it trains every decision that follows. Here is what happens neurologically in that 5-second window. The moment the alarm sounds, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of deliberate choice, begins to engage. Simultaneously, your basal ganglia activates the default morning program. Whatever you did yesterday morning, and the morning before that, and the 100 mornings before that, is cued and ready to execute. You are standing at a fork. One path is the automatic pattern. The other path is the intentional one. And you have approximately 5 seconds before your brain resolves the conflict by choosing whichever path has the stronger neural encoding. If you hit snooze, you have just cast a vote for the identity that defaults, the identity that chooses comfort over commitment. And that vote does not stay in bed with you. It travels. Behavioral researchers at the University of Nottingham studied decision cascades and found that the outcome of early morning decisions predicted the quality of decisions made throughout the rest of the day with remarkable consistency. An early capitulation to comfort primed the brain for further capitulations. Conversely, an early exercise of intentional control primed the brain for further control. Mel Robbins popularized this concept with the 5-second rule. The idea that if you do not act on an instinct within 5 seconds, your brain will kill the impulse. Her framework is directionally correct, and it aligns with the neuroscience of activation energy, the minimum threshold of effort required to initiate a behavior. But I want to take it further than she did, because the snooze button is not just a moment of laziness. It is a habit installation event. Every morning you hit snooze, you are strengthening a neural pathway that says when this cue arrives, the response is avoidance. Every morning you stand up immediately, you are strengthening a neural pathway that says when this cue arrives, the response is engagement. You are not just choosing to get up. You are programming your brain for how it will handle every difficult cue it encounters for the rest of the day. Thomas Corley's research supports this directly. 44% of wealthy individuals in his study woke up at least 3 hours before their workday began. Only 3% of those who struggled financially did the same. But the differentiator was not the early hour itself. It was the consistency and intentionality of the waking behavior. The wealthy subjects did not negotiate with their alarm. They did not allow the brain to debate. They had pre-decided. The alarm was not a question. It was a command. And that pre-decision meant their prefrontal cortex did not have to expend energy on the choice. It was already made. The 5-second window closed before it opened. This is the principle of pre-commitment applied to the micro level. You are not deciding each morning whether to get up. You decided once. And that single decision, made in advance and repeated through practice, eliminates the daily willpower tax that most people pay before their day has even started. Now here is the part that connects this to wealth. The first 90 minutes of your day, what performance psychologists call the golden window, is when your prefrontal cortex operates at peak capacity. Cortisol levels are naturally elevated after waking, which increases alertness and executive function. Glucose reserves are full. Decision fatigue has not yet accumulated. This is, neurologically, the highest value time in your entire day. And the majority of people spend it scrolling, reacting to messages, watching news, or commuting while their minds wander. High earners use this window for what matters most: financial review, strategic planning, skill development, not because they are more disciplined in the moment, but because their morning is pre-engineered. The decisions were made before the alarm went off. The environment is controlled. The phone is not in reach. The routine runs automatically because it has been installed through consistent repetition in a consistent context, the exact formula we covered in the Neuroscience chapter. There is a secondary effect here that amplifies the compounding. Research from the American Psychological Association found that individuals who completed a challenging task early in the day reported higher self-efficacy scores throughout the remaining hours. Self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to execute behaviors that produce desired outcomes, is one of the strongest predictors of financial success in the behavioral science literature. It is not just that the morning routine builds good habits. It is that completing the morning routine builds the psychological confidence that makes every subsequent decision in the day sharper, bolder, and more aligned with your long-term financial strategy. One domino tips the next, and the first domino falls in the first 5 seconds. Consider two professionals. Both earn $80,000 a year. Both have the same 24 hours. Person A wakes up, checks their phone, browses social media for 20 minutes, rushes through breakfast, and arrives at work already reactive and behind. Person B wakes up, does not touch their phone, spends 15 minutes reviewing financial goals and investment positions, reads for 20 minutes on a topic related to their career advancement, and arrives at work with a clear strategic agenda already set. Both people spend the same amount of time, but one is compounding and the other is drifting. And the divergence started in the first 5 seconds. After 1 year, the financial difference between these two people is already visible. Person B has reviewed their investments 365 times, read for over 120 hours on career-relevant material, and made financial decisions from a position of engagement rather than anxiety. Person A has spent roughly the same total hours consuming content that did not compound, made financial decisions reactively, and maintained the exact same relationship with money they had 12 months earlier. Same salary, same intelligence, same potential, completely different trajectory. And the fork in the road was a 5-second decision repeated daily. This is not about becoming a morning person. This is about recognizing that the first physical action you take each day is a neurological vote. And like every other vote we have discussed, it either confirms or contradicts the identity of someone who builds wealth deliberately. There is no neutral position. Hitting snooze is not doing nothing. It is actively reinforcing the habit of choosing comfort over progress. And that reinforcement compounds, just like every other habit, invisibly and relentlessly, in the direction you may not intend. So here is the installation protocol for this specific habit. Tonight, before you sleep, place your phone across the room. Set one alarm. No backup alarms, no snooze option. When the alarm sounds, you have 5 seconds to stand up and put your feet on the floor. That is the entire behavior. Stand up. From that point, your pre-designed morning routine takes over. But the 5-second window is the gate. Everything flows from whether you open it or close it. Practice this for 2 weeks. Just the standing up. Do not try to overhaul your entire morning on day 1. Install the first link in the chain. Let it transfer to basal ganglia automation. Then add the next link. This is sequential installation, and it is the only method that produces permanent behavioral change without willpower burnout. You have now claimed the most powerful moment of your day. But there is a silent saboteur that most people do not even know exists. It disguises itself as motivation. It feels like progress, and it is quietly stealing the neurochemical fuel you need to actually execute your goals. The most dangerous thing you can do with a financial ambition is the thing that feels the most natural. We are going to expose IT next. Chapter 6, The Silence Protocol. What I am about to tell you will contradict nearly every piece of advice you have ever received about goal setting. Every motivational speaker, every accountability coach, every social media post about manifesting your dreams has told you the same thing. Share your goals. Tell the world what you are going to do. Make a public commitment. Hold yourself accountable through visibility. It sounds logical. It feels empowering. And according to a series of studies led by psychologist Peter Gallwitzer at New York University, it is one of the most effective ways to guarantee you will never follow through. Gallwitzer's research, published across multiple experiments, demonstrated a phenomenon he called premature sense of completeness. When people publicly announced their intentions, their brains registered the announcement itself as partial achievement. The act of telling someone, "I am going to save $10,000 this year," triggered a dopamine response, a small neurochemical reward that partially satisfied the motivational system. The brain treated the announcement as progress. And because the motivational fuel had already been partially spent on the declaration, less fuel remained for the actual execution. In one of his key experiments, participants who told others about their study intentions spent significantly less time actually studying than those who kept their intentions private. The announcers felt satisfied. The silent group felt driven. The announcement had hijacked the reward system, giving the brain the feeling of accomplishment without the reality of it. Now apply this to financial goals. Think about the last time you told someone, a friend, a partner, a colleague, about a financial goal you had set. You were going to start investing. You were going to cut unnecessary spending. You were going to finally build that emergency fund. Remember how good it felt to say it. Remember the encouragement you received. Remember the sense of momentum. And then remember how quickly that momentum faded. You were not lazy. You were neurochemically hijacked. The dopamine you needed to drive the actual behavior had been released prematurely, spent on the performance of intention rather than the execution of action. Your brain had already collected a partial reward. The remaining deficit was not enough to push through the friction of actually changing your behavior. This is especially dangerous in the social media era. Posting your goals online amplifies the effect exponentially. Every like, every comment, every supportive reply sends another microdose of dopamine into your reward circuitry, and each dose further reduces the neurological urgency to act. You are, in the most literal sense, outsourcing your sense of achievement to an audience while your actual behavior remains unchanged. Consider the pattern. January 1st, someone posts their financial goals for the year. The engagement floods in. By January 15th, the behavior has stalled. But the social reward was already collected. The brain has already been paid. And now the account is empty, both neurologically and often literally. A survey published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that participants who shared their purchase reduction goals on social media reduced their actual spending by less than half the amount achieved by participants who kept the same goals private. The public group felt more motivated. The private group was more motivated. And the gap between feeling and being is the gap this entire book is designed to close. The wealthy understand this intuitively. Corley's research found that 63% of self-made millionaires described themselves as private about their financial goals. Not secretive, private. They did not broadcast their ambitions. They did not seek external validation for their plans. They operated quietly, let their behavior accumulate, and allowed results to speak for themselves. This was not personality. It was strategy. Whether they knew the neuroscience or not, their behavior aligned perfectly with what Gallwitzer's research predicts. There is a second mechanism at work here that makes the silence protocol even more powerful. When you keep your goals private, you maintain what psychologists call creative tension. This is the psychological discomfort created by the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Creative tension is fuel. It generates the low-level urgency that keeps you returning to the behavior day after day. But the moment you announce your goal and receive social validation, the tension dissipates. The gap feels smaller, the urgency drops, and the behavior loses its energetic foundation. So here's the protocol. From this point forward, treat your financial goals like classified information. Not permanently, not forever, but during the installation phase. During the 66 days it takes to transfer a new behavior from prefrontal control to basal ganglia automation, your goals are silent. You tell no one. You post nothing. You let the creative tension build. Let the dopamine flow toward execution rather than announcement. And you let your brain do what it does best. Encode behaviors that are consistently performed and consistently rewarded through real results, not social applause. There is one exception. Gallwitzer's later research distinguished between identity-based announcements, which are harmful, and process-based accountability, which can be helpful. Saying, "I am going to become wealthy," is an identity announcement. It triggers premature satisfaction. But saying, "I am going to review my portfolio every morning at 7, and having someone check whether you did it is process accountability. The distinction matters. Process accountability keeps you executing without giving your brain the reward of the outcome. Identity announcements give the reward without the execution. If you use an accountability partner, keep the conversation strictly operational. Did you do the behavior today? Yes or no? No discussion about the grand vision. No celebration of the plan. Just confirmation of the action. This keeps the dopamine where it belongs, in the execution loop, not in the announcement loop. Think of it as the difference between a flight engineer and a cheering crowd. The flight engineer runs the checklist. Were the pre-flight checks completed? Is the fuel level confirmed? Are the instruments calibrated? The engineer does not ask how the pilot feels about the destination. The cheering crowd is emotionally satisfying, but it does not keep the plane in the air. Your accountability partner should be an engineer, not a crowd. Their function is verification, not validation. And that distinction preserves the creative tension that drives execution. The silence protocol is counterintuitive. It conflicts with the extroverted, share everything culture that dominates social media and self-help. But the neuroscience is unambiguous. The most dangerous thing you can do with a new financial habit is talk about it before it is installed. Build in silence. Let the compound effect work. And when the results are undeniable, when the evidence has accumulated beyond any doubt, then you can share. Not to seek validation, but to teach others what actually works. You now know what to do and what not to do. You know the 5 Keystone habits, the identity foundation, the first 5 seconds principle, and the silence protocol. The next question is how to make all of this feel effortless. How to program your brain so deeply that wealth-building behaviors run on autopilot without friction, without resistance, and without the constant need to motivate yourself. That is the Autopilot code, and it is built on 300 studies that most people have never heard of. Chapter 7, Implementation Intentions, the Autopilot Code. If there were a single technique that could double your probability of following through on any financial behavior, you would want to know about it. There is. It has been tested in over 300 studies across 4 decades. And the vast majority of people building wealth have never heard of it. It is called the implementation intention, and it was developed by the same researcher who discovered the silence protocol, Peter Gollwitzer at New York University. Except this time, instead of revealing what kills follow-through, he discovered what engineers it. An implementation intention is a pre-made decision, structured in a specific format. When situation X arises, I will perform behavior Y. Not, I want to save money. Instead, when I receive my paycheck on the 15th, I will immediately transfer $200 to my investment account before opening any other app on my phone. The specificity is not optional. It is the mechanism. Here is why this format works at the neurological level. When you create a standard goal, such as, I want to invest more, that goal lives in your prefrontal cortex as an abstract intention. It competes with every other abstract intention you hold, and it has no environmental trigger to initiate it. Your brain recognizes the goal, but has no instructions for when, where, or how to execute it. It is a destination without directions. When you create an implementation intention, you pair the desired behavior with a specific environmental cue. This pairing creates what neuroscientists call a cue behavior link that the basal ganglia can encode directly. You are essentially programming a new if-then rule into the same system that handles your automatic behaviors. When the cue appears, the behavior fires without conscious deliberation. You are writing code for your brain's autopilot. The research supporting this is not marginal. A meta-analysis published in the journal Advances in Experimental Social Psychology by Gollwitzer and Pascal Sheeran reviewed 94 independent studies and found that implementation intentions had a medium to large effect on behavior, increasing follow-through rates by approximately double compared to standard goal intentions. Double. Across domains including health, academic performance, and financial behavior. This is one of the most robust findings in behavioral science, and it remains almost entirely absent from popular wealth-building literature. Let me show you how to apply this specifically to financial habits. Take Keystone habit number 2 from the earlier chapter, daily financial contact. The abstract version of this goal is, I will check my finances daily. The implementation intention version is, when I sit down with my morning coffee at 7:15, I will open my brokerage app and spend 2 minutes reviewing my portfolio performance before doing anything else on my phone. Notice the structure. A specific cue, sitting with coffee at 7:15. A specific behavior, open brokerage app and review for 2 minutes. And a specific context constraint, before anything else on the phone. That level of specificity does 3 things simultaneously. First, it eliminates the decision about when to do the behavior. You have pre-decided. Second, it attaches the behavior to an existing cue that already occurs automatically, your morning coffee, leveraging what behavioral scientists call habit stacking. Third, it creates a protected time window by specifying before anything else, which prevents the behavior from being displaced by higher impulse activities like checking social media. Now here is the part that elevates this from useful to transformative. Implementation intentions can be chained. You can create a cascade of if-then links that execute in sequence, turning your entire morning into an automatic program. When my alarm goes off, I stand up immediately. When I stand up, I walk to the kitchen and start the coffee. When the coffee is ready, I sit down and open my brokerage app. When I close the brokerage app, I open my journal and review my financial goals for 90 seconds. Each behavior serves as the cue for the next. And once the chain is encoded, the entire sequence runs as a single neurological chunk, triggered by one initial cue, the alarm. This is what high performers mean when they say their morning runs on autopilot. They are not speaking metaphorically. They have literally programmed a behavioral chain that their basal ganglia executes with minimal prefrontal involvement. They do not think about what to do next. The next behavior is already cued. Research from the University of Bath found that participants who formed implementation intentions for financial saving behaviors were 68% more likely to reach their savings targets than those who simply set the goal. And this was not a short-term spike. The effects persisted across a 6-month follow-up, suggesting that the behaviors had transferred to automatic control. This is the difference between a technique and an architecture. Techniques fade. Architecture endures. Consider the financial implications of this compounding. If an implementation intention doubles your probability of executing a daily savings transfer, and you maintain that behavior for a year, the difference between the intention group and the control group is not twice the savings. It is exponentially more, because the implementation intention group is also building the neural infrastructure that supports increasingly ambitious financial behaviors over time. The transfer to savings becomes automatic, freeing cognitive resources to tackle the next financial challenge. Automation liberates capacity, and liberated capacity compounds. There is one critical refinement that most people miss when building implementation intentions. You need a failure protocol, an if-then plan for when the primary plan breaks down. Gallwitzer's research showed that people who included a contingency plan, for example, if I miss my morning review because of an early meeting, I will do a 2-minute review at noon before eating lunch, maintain significantly higher consistency than those with only a primary plan. Life is not perfectly controllable, but your response to disruption can be pre-programmed just as precisely as your primary behavior. Let me give you the complete installation sequence. Step 1. Identify one Keystone habit you want to install. Step 2. Write the implementation intention in full if-then format with specific cue, behavior, and context. Step 3. Write one contingency plan for the most likely disruption. Step 4. Perform the behavior in the exact same context for a minimum of 14 consecutive days without variation. 14 days of flawless repetition is the minimum encoding threshold identified in Wood's research for the brain to begin treating a behavior as routine rather than novel. Step 5. After 14 days, add the next link in the chain. This is not a hack. This is a construction process. You are building neural infrastructure one connection at a time. And unlike motivation, which fluctuates with your mood and your circumstances, neural infrastructure is permanent. Once the pathway is built, it stays built. The behavior runs whether you feel inspired or exhausted, whether the market is booming or crashing, whether your week was productive or disastrous. The Autopilot code is the most underused tool in personal finance. Not because it is complex, because it is not dramatic. It does not make for exciting social media content. There is no before and after photo. There is just the quiet, relentless accumulation of automated wealth-building behaviors running beneath the surface of your conscious life, compounding day after day after day. You now have the code, but every system, no matter how well engineered, will eventually face pressure. Life will hit, disruptions will come, stress will spike, and in those moments, most habit systems collapse. The next chapter is about the rare few that do not. The habits that do not just survive pressure. They get stronger because of it. Chapter 8. Antifragile habits. Getting stronger under pressure. Most people believe that comfort is neutral, that resting in a familiar routine, avoiding unnecessary stress, and staying within known boundaries is a safe and reasonable strategy. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the former options trader turned risk theorist, spent an entire book dismantling that belief. In Antifragile, Taleb introduced a concept that goes beyond resilience. Resilient systems survive pressure. Antifragile systems get stronger because of it. And the distinction between those two responses is the difference between habits that collapse at the first sign of difficulty and habits that become more deeply encoded precisely when life gets hard. Here is why this matters for your financial habit system. You are not building habits in a laboratory. You are building them in a real life, with deadlines, unexpected expenses, family obligations, health challenges, and emotional turbulence. And if your habit system is designed to work only when conditions are favorable, it is fragile. It will break. The question is not whether pressure will come. The question is whether your habits are engineered to use that pressure as fuel. Neuroscience provides a direct mechanism for how this works. Research from the University of California, San Francisco, specifically the lab of neuroscientist Adam Gazzaley, has shown that moderate stress activates the locus coeruleus norepinephrine system in the brain, which sharpens attention and increases the speed of habit encoding. In plain language, when you perform a behavior under mild stress, your brain encodes that behavior faster and more deeply than when you perform it in a comfortable, low-stakes environment. The stress does not weaken the habit. It strengthens the neural pathway. This is the biological basis of anti-fragility applied to behavior. Think about what this means practically. The morning you are most tempted to skip your financial review, the morning after a terrible night of sleep or a stressful confrontation at work, is actually the morning when performing that review has the greatest encoding power. Your brain is in a heightened state. The locus coeruleus is active. Norepinephrine is elevated. And the habit loop you execute in that state will be carved deeper into your basal ganglia than any loop performed on a calm, easy Sunday morning. This is the principle that separates the financial habits of the average person from those of the high performer. The average person maintains their habits when things are going well and abandons them when things get hard. They exercise when they feel energetic, save when they have surplus, and review their goals when they are motivated. Their system is optimized for comfort. And comfort, as Taleb would say, is not neutral. It is actively eroding your capacity for growth. Because a system that only works when conditions are perfect is a system that fails in the real world, where conditions are almost never perfect. The high performer does the opposite, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they understand the engineering principle. They protect their core habits most fiercely during high-stress periods. When life gets hard, they do not subtract behaviors. They guard them. The daily portfolio review still happens. The morning routine still executes. The implementation intentions still fire. And because those behaviors are performed under stress, the neural encoding accelerates. The habits do not just survive the pressure. They come out the other side deeper, faster, and more automatic than before. Here is a practical framework for building anti-fragile financial habits. It comes from adapting Taleb's barbell strategy to behavioral engineering. The barbell strategy in finance means concentrating your portfolio at two extremes: very safe assets and very high-risk assets, with nothing in the middle. Applied to habits, it means protecting a small set of non-negotiable core behaviors with extreme consistency while maintaining complete flexibility on everything else. Your non-negotiable core might be 3 behaviors: the morning alarm response, the 2-minute financial contact, the 90-second goal review. These 3 are sacred. They execute every day, regardless of circumstances. No exceptions, no negotiations, no modifications. They are the bedrock of your habit architecture, and treating them as non-negotiable is what makes them anti-fragile, because the repeated experience of executing them under difficult conditions trains your brain to treat them as automatic even when cognitive resources are depleted. Everything else is flexible. You can adjust when you read, how long you exercise, what you eat for lunch. Flexibility on the periphery prevents the all-or-nothing thinking that destroys most habit systems. People who try to maintain a 20-step morning routine inevitably miss a step, declare the whole system broken, and abandon everything. That is fragility. A system that protects 3 non-negotiable behaviors and allows everything else to adapt is anti-fragile. It bends without breaking, and the core keeps compounding. There is a second layer to anti-fragility that connects directly to the identity chapter. When you maintain your core habits under pressure, you are not just encoding behaviors. You are reinforcing your identity as someone who does not break, someone who shows up regardless. And that identity, once established, becomes self-reinforcing. The next time pressure arrives, your brain does not generate a debate about whether to maintain the habit. It simply executes. Because that is who you are. An identity-consistent behavior, as we discussed, runs on a fundamentally different neurological pathway than willpower-driven behavior. Let me give you a specific technique from cognitive behavioral research that accelerates anti-fragile habit development. It is called stress inoculation, and it was originally developed by psychologist Donald Meichenbaum for treating anxiety disorders. Adapted for habit building, it works like this. Once a week, deliberately practice your core habits under artificially challenging conditions. Set your alarm 30 minutes earlier than usual. Do your financial review immediately after receiving an upsetting email. Perform your goal rehearsal when you are tired, hungry, or frustrated. This controlled exposure to difficulty trains your brain to associate the habit with a wide range of emotional and environmental states, not just the comfortable ones. The habit becomes context-independent. It runs in any conditions. And that is the definition of anti-fragile automation. Here is a practical example. Imagine it is Wednesday evening. You have had an exhausting day. Your energy is depleted and your prefrontal cortex is running on fumes. The average person in this state abandons their evening review, orders delivery food, and scrolls social media until sleep. But you have been stress inoculated. You have practiced executing your core habits in exactly this kind of diminished state. So your brain does not debate. It does not negotiate. The implementation intention fires. When I sit down after work, I do my 2-minute financial review before anything else. The behavior executes. And because it executed under stress, the neural encoding is now deeper than it would have been on a relaxed Sunday morning. You are literally building a stronger system every time life tests it. This is compounding applied not just to money, but to the behavioral machinery that produces money. You have now built a system that survives, a system that gets stronger when tested. But there is one final confrontation that most people avoid for their entire lives. It is not a confrontation with the market, with competitors, or with external circumstances. It is a confrontation with yourself, with the gap between who you believe you are and what your evidence actually shows. That confrontation has a name, and it is coming in XT. Chapter 9, The Mirror Test, Radical Financial Honesty. There is an exercise that most people will resist, not because it is complicated, not because it requires special tools, but because it confronts the single most protected structure in the human psyche, your self-narrative. The story you tell yourself about who you are, how you are doing, and where you are headed. This exercise is called the mirror test, and it is, for many people, the the most emotionally activating moment in this entire book. Here's the test. Look at 3 pieces of evidence from your actual life. Your bank account balance as of today, your daily schedule for the past 90 days, how you actually spent your time, not how you plan to, and your current health metrics, your weight, your sleep quality, your energy levels. Now ask yourself one question. Based on this evidence alone, not your intentions, not your plans, not your aspirations, who am I right now? Not who you want to be, not who you are working toward becoming. Who does the evidence say you are today, at this moment, based on what you have actually done? This is uncomfortable because most people live in a gap between their self-image and their behavioral evidence. Psychologists call this the intention-behavior gap, and research from Pascal Sheeran at the University of Sheffield estimates that the average person achieves less than 50% of their stated intentions. Half of what you say you are going to do, you do not do. And yet your self-image often reflects the full 100% of your intentions, as though wanting to be someone and being that person are the same thing. They are not. And the mirror test forces that distinction into the light. The reason this exercise matters for financial habit installation is that it establishes a true baseline. You cannot navigate to a destination if you do not know your starting point. And most people's mental map of their starting point is wildly inaccurate. They believe they are closer to their financial goals than they are, because they count their intentions as progress. The mirror test strips away the narrative and leaves only the data. And data, unlike stories, does not lie. Research from the Harvard Business School by Francesca Gino and colleagues found that individuals who engaged in structured self-reflection, specifically reviewing evidence of their actual behaviors rather than their intended behaviors, showed a 23% improvement in subsequent goal-directed action. The mechanism is what psychologists call realistic self-assessment, and it functions as a cognitive reset. Once the brain acknowledges the true gap between current reality and desired outcome, it recalculates the level of effort required and allocates resources accordingly. Without the mirror test, the brain underestimates the gap and underallocates effort. With it, the brain adjusts. Here is how to perform the mirror test with financial specificity. This is not abstract. This is a structured protocol. Step 1. Pull your bank and credit card statements for the past 90 days. Calculate your actual savings rate, not what you intended to save, what you actually saved. For most people, this number is lower than they expect. The Bureau of Economic Analysis reports that the average American personal savings rate has fluctuated around 4 to 5% in recent years. If your rate is close to this average, the evidence says you are financially average. That is not a judgment. It is a data point, and data points are the foundation of change. Step 2. Review your calendar and screen time data for the past 90 days. Calculate how many hours you spent on strategic learning versus passive entertainment. How many hours on financial review versus financial avoidance. How many hours on building skills versus consuming content. Again, not what you planned to do, what you actually did. Your phone's screen time report does not have an opinion. It has facts. Step 3. Look at your health data, because physical health and financial health are neurologically linked. Research from the American Psychological Association demonstrates that sleep deprivation reduces prefrontal cortex function by up to 40%, which directly impairs financial decision-making quality. If you are chronically undersleeping, your financial habits are running on half power. This is not a motivational observation. It is a neural resource allocation problem. Now, with all 3 data sets in front of you, answer the question. Based on this evidence, who am I? Is the person reflected in this data someone who is building wealth? Or is the person reflected in this data someone who is planning to build wealth, but not yet doing it? The difference between those 2 answers is the difference between motion and progress. Motion feels productive. You are reading, thinking, planning, intending. But progress requires behavioral evidence. And the mirror test is the mechanism that separates the 2. Most people avoid this confrontation because it generates shame. But shame is not the goal, and it is not useful here. The goal is clarity. Shame is backward-looking. It focuses on what you should have done. Clarity is forward-looking. It focuses on what the data says you need to do next. And when you approach the mirror test with the mindset of an engineer reviewing system diagnostics rather than a judge issuing a verdict, the experience transforms from painful to powerful. The data is not condemning you. It is informing you. And informed systems outperform uninformed ones by orders of magnitude. Here is the protocol for integrating the mirror test into your habit system. Once per month, on the same day, perform the full 3-part evidence review. Document the numbers. Compare them to the previous month. Look for trends, not snapshots. A single month of low savings means nothing. 3 consecutive months of declining savings is a system signal that requires attention. Trends are the language your habits speak when they are trying to tell you something. Learn to listen. The average person avoids their financial data. They check their account when they have to, feel a spike of anxiety, and close the app as fast as possible. Their relationship with their own finances is one of avoidance dressed as indifference. The person who builds wealth does the opposite. They lean into the data, not because they enjoy it, but because they understand that avoidance is a habit too. And it compounds in exactly the direction you do not want. There is a principle in engineering called closed-loop feedback. A closed-loop system continuously measures its output and adjusts its input based on the measurement. An open-loop system operates without feedback, executing the same program regardless of results. Most people run their financial lives as open-loop systems. They execute behaviors without measuring outcomes, without comparing actual results to intended results, and without adjusting based on the gap. The mirror test converts your financial life into a closed-loop system. You measure, compare, adjust, and execute. Every month, the loop tightens. Every month, the gap between intention and evidence narrows. And that narrowing is not just progress. It is the behavioral signature of someone who is becoming wealthy through mechanism rather than hoping for it through mood. By performing the mirror test regularly, you accomplish 2 things simultaneously. First, you maintain a reality-based self-assessment that prevents the intention-behavior gap from widening. Second, you create a built-in accountability mechanism that does not rely on another person, social media, or willpower. The data holds you accountable, and data does not get tired, distracted, or emotionally compromised. You have now confronted the truth. You know where you are, not where you wish you were. And from that foundation of radical honesty, you are ready for the final piece of this system. A structured, day-by-day protocol that takes everything you have learned, every principle, every mechanism, every tool, and assembles it into a 30-day installation program designed to permanently rewire your daily routine for maximum financial compounding. The protocol starts now. Chapter 10, the 30-day Wealth Habit Protocol. You have the neuroscience. You have the 5 Keystone habits. You have the identity framework, the silence protocol, the implementation intentions, the antifragile principles, and the mirror test. What you need now is a construction schedule. Teresa Amabile and Stephen Kramer at Harvard Business School discovered the single most powerful driver of sustained motivation. It was not big wins. It was the daily experience of making meaningful progress, even if that progress was tiny. That finding is the engine behind this protocol. Days 1 through 7. The foundation phase. Install 1 behavior. Stand up within 5 seconds of your alarm. That is it. Place your phone across the room. 1 alarm. No snooze. On day 1, perform the mirror test. Pull your bank statements, screen time data, and health metrics. Document your baseline. Days 8 through 14. The contact phase. Add a 2-minute financial review to your morning chain. When you sit down with your coffee, open your financial app and review for 2 minutes before touching anything else. Activate the silence protocol. Share your goals with no one. Days 15 through 21. The learning phase. After your financial review, add 15 minutes of strategic reading targeted at your financial or professional goals. Write a contingency plan for disrupted mornings. Keep the chain running. Days 22 through 28. The identity phase. Add 90 seconds of structured goal review after your reading session. Throughout the day, ask 1 question before every decision. Does someone building serious wealth make this choice? Days 29 and 30. The audit phase. Perform the mirror test again. Compare to day 1. You will not see dramatic financial results in 30 days, but you will see behavioral evidence that your neural architecture is shifting. That evidence is worth more than any short-term financial gain, because it is the foundation everything else compounds from. This protocol is a starting point, not a finish line. The remaining keystone habits, controlled social environment, and pre-commitment elimination, will integrate naturally as your identity solidifies over the following months. Remember the core thesis. Wealth is not a financial problem. It is a behavioral one. Your daily automatic habits are either compounding toward financial freedom or compounding toward stagnation. You now have the mechanism to choose which direction you compound. Not through willpower, not through motivation, through architecture. The mechanism, not the mood. Build in silence. Let the results speak.